I move that we recommit 17 to the Overtures Committee next year.
Is there a second? Very well, sir. Let me speak to it.
Mr. Moderator, at the 50th General Assembly last year, a similar overture was submitted seeking to require background checks amongst the presbyteries. That previous overture was referred back to the presbytery along with many important critiques, asking the presbytery to make the overture stronger. This year, several overtures were submitted, many of them directly addressing the specific critiques from last year. These presbyteries took the wise advice seriously and reached out to concerned presbyters around the denomination to ensure this year's proposals address the shortcomings from last year. I know of many presbyteries that have already adopted the suggested policies from the original Overture 17 or similar policies in their own bylaws. This demonstrates not only that the concerns have been addressed appropriately, but also that there is a widespread desire for this standard in our character examination of candidates and transferring pastors. However, during the Overtures Committee this year, when Overture 17 was being discussed, an argument against Overture 17 was made that a universal requirement of background checks would not work well because of the vast number of legal regulations in each of the different states and municipalities in the PCA. I believe correspondence from the Administrative Committee was read during the Overtures Committee communicating something similar. In light of that argument and others like it, Overture 17 was amended to dramatically lose the thrust of a requirement in the PCO and was replaced with a mere declaration from the 51st General Assembly to encourage presbyters to adopt such measures. I believe that the characterization that Overture 17 sought to create a one-size-fits-all requirement is a dangerous misreading of the original overture, which specifically gives provisions to each presbytery to establish their own requirements for background checks, recognizing that it would be impossible to have a one-size-fits-all requirement. Further, while I appreciate the Overtures Committee's desire to do something with this overture, I'm not sure that recommending the presbyteries make these changes actually does anything at all. We have already received the DASA report as an assembly, which strongly recommended background checks. What more would another recommendation today do? Moreover, we must consider the gravity of our responsibility as shepherds.
Sorry, sir, your time has expired. Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? I don't see anyone else at the microphones. Mr. Chairman. Oh, thank you, sir. Microphone 7. For what purpose do you rise?
I rise to speak for the overture.
There's no one else standing, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay, John Alexander, Warrior Presbytery, Greensboro, Alabama teaching elder. I'm relatively new to the PCA. I came in 2018 from the Southern Baptist Convention. I was born in the Southern Baptist Convention. I've spent 46 years as a pastor's son in the SBC and 20 years in the SBC as a pastor myself. In 2007, the SBC had an opportunity to address the issues that are now plaguing and swamping that convention. A generation now rises which condemns those who failed to act on that, on the recommendation for background checks. I don't want to see that happen here. For one thing, I want to thank those who put up with me when I first heard about the Overtures report and I interrupted your lunch to ask you whether you what your opinion of background checks. Once you realized that no, I was not a reporter, thank you for answering my questions. Two things came out. Number one, people said that we are a bottoms-up denomination. I would argue instead that we are a top-down denomination, and the BCO is at the top of our denomination. Tuesday night, we passed a resolution or an overture about deacons and deaconesses that we have now sent down even to those who may have a cultural difference with that overture. Once it was passed and added to the BCO, it became top-down. There are also those who talk about the expense of a background report. We're a rather wealthy denomination, and I'm quite certain if we were to take a poll around here, several of us, myself included, could actually cover the cost of a background check. And any church here who has a membership under 50, I will pay personally for your first background check. This is what it comes down to. We have the opportunity to avoid the humiliation another denomination is experiencing right now. What cost would you put on the potential victim that we may protect and the church? The reputation of a church is incalculable. The reputation of our denomination is incalculable. We have an opportunity to be the generation that saves the PCA from what someone else is experiencing.
Thank you, sir. Your time has expired. Microphone 1. For what purpose do you rise, sir?
To speak in favor of the substitute to recommit.
Please proceed, sir.
Teaching Elder Jared Krulish, Pacific Northwest Presbytery. This seems like something that should be easy for us to accomplish. Background checks are performed by the Boys and Girls Club of America, Big Brothers and Big Sisters of America, the YMCA, 4-H, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, Make-A-Wish Foundation, and every school in America and every sports team that works with children in America. It is a basic level entrance into anyone who works with children, which we presume is all of our teaching elders. We understand it's not going to accomplish and perfect safety and guarantee safety of anyone. Nor is the lock on your front door, nor is your security system. Those things can be bypassed, but you still lock your door because it makes your house a little less interesting to someone who would break in than someone whose house is unlocked. Fathers and brothers, there are predators now, and they don't just stumble into churches, they look for them. They are rattling at the doors. We get people who come by in our neighborhood every so often and rattle the doors on our car to see if they're locked. And if they're locked, they walk away, and if they're unlocked, they rummage through. Right now, I fear that our doors are unlocked. Please recommit.
Thank you, sir. Seeing no one else at the microphone, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Fathers and brothers, the recommendation of the Overtures Committee is that we would vote to approve Overture 17 as it has been amended. I would just note a few things. First of all the concerns that have been raised already from the floor were raised in Overtures Committee. They were debated again for far longer than even the 10 minutes that we have received today. There are a number of concerns that were raised to the brothers, particularly legal issues, where we make requirements and the difficulties, even in terms of all the various different areas. I think this is the one-size-fits-all issues, that we're not suggesting that presbyteries are not competent to figure those things out, but rather that to require them to do that, to all the reporting requirements, the keeping of records, all of these things. There are other issues with regard to, I believe it's the Fair Credit Reporting Act, that I don't think anybody has really mentioned today or thought about. These things are major issues. We received advice from the PCA's legal counsel, not necessarily in one direction or the other on the overture, but just advising us of the potential legal complexities for the denomination and RBCO to require background checks. I would also suggest that this overture and our amendment is in no way trying to prevent anyone from doing a background check. Neither are we trying to persuade anyone that they should not do background checks. We were reminded several times that it would be foolish for any of us not to require background checks, whether that's in the presbytery of those coming in under care or to be ordained or transferred, or in our churches for those who work as officers or even staff with children. However, we did believe that the language that was presented was too restrictive or too prescriptive, I should say, in the way in which that it put the requirements for background checks in our Book of Church Order. And instead of saying no to the whole idea, we decided that it would be wise and prudent for the assembly, this language is not going in our Book of Church Order, but that this assembly would make the statement that you find there in the resolved on page 171, lines 42 and 43.
Mr. Chairman, you are actually out of time. We misset the timer, so I'll give you 15 seconds to wind it up, please. Yes, sir. Where are we?
Alexander again. Given that you have given additional time to the chairman, I request additional time for one final comment.
That's not the way it works. We would actually at this point have to vote to extend debate.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second? Very well. All those in favor of extending debate by 5 minutes, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed? No. The noes have it. The debate is closed. The motion before you, brothers, as a reminder, we've got special rules as we're dealing with overtures. So with overtures, we can't amend on the floor. We can do one of three things. We can approve, we can disapprove, or we can recommit. So the motion before you right now is whether to make whether to recommit this motion. So the first thing we need to do is vote on whether we want to make that the main motion or not. All those in favor of making the motion to recommit the main motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed? No. The noes have it. We're back to the main motion, which is the recommendation of the Overtures Committee. Seeing no one at a microphone, are you ready to vote? All in favor of the Overtures Committee recommendation, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed?